what world are we living in? This is my reaction video to Putin's statement tonight. So, I want to remind everyone that I have said from day one everything he was saying about NATO and this game he was playing with the West was all a facade, was all a smokescreen, that he never had any intention of settling diplomatically. I also agree with some previous comments that the Atlantic made, that he's nostalgic for Russian imperialism. So remember those comments from the last couple of weeks that I've made in my previous videos here. Nobody should really be surprised by Putin's revelation tonight that his real motivation is not anything to do with the Ukraine. Now, I have said that what he wanted was the land access to Crimea and the southeast corner of Ukraine, but I also stated that if he did that, Ukraine would definitely join NATO and that he would have to take over the entire country. Now, this morning, Jake told NBC that, and I'll link this below, that the intelligence that the U.S. has shows Stalin-style obliteration of Ukraine, just totally coming in, crushing them, defeating them. I've checked in with my friend whose parents are there, said, please tell them to come visit their grandbaby in Germany. Like, things are getting drastic, and I don't know, what her comments were about Putin's statement tonight, but he went a lot further than the Ukraine. He commented that all of the rest of Eastern Europe, who was former Soviet Union bloc, should never have been allowed to leave Russia's government control. And I've mentioned previously that I have many friends living in many of those countries who still remember the oppression that they experienced with Russian dictatorship, censoring every thought that they had. And they absolutely do not want to be under Russian control. So here we are. I am going to say outright to Jake, preventing World War III is outside my pay grade. We have moved beyond basic political strategy, which is where I kind of operate, to higher level military and tactics. I have a lot of experience working across the Atlantic in political strategy, but this is far beyond my capabilities now. Clearly, in so many ways, this oversteps so many norms and boundaries that have been in place since World War II. So obviously, these are all the questions that are going to be facing us, but my father observed that there was the Greek person who commented that when countries feel like they have stagnated, when they've plateaued and are no longer growing, that is when they lash out and start to create confrontation on their borders. So I think the question we could potentially debate is post-Soviet Union Russia. My father said that the U.S. had the option to include Russia in a lot of things that happened post-Soviet Union, and it didn't. I wasn't old enough to remember much of that, so I don't really know what he's talking about. I think that it is clear, and I am not surprised at all about the revelation, first of all, that Putin is imperialistic, but second, that he's fashioned himself as, well, I learned everything that Russia did wrong back then, and I'm here to conquer the world and be the correct ruler of this Russian empire. That's something that I've noticed in him and I think that the Atlantic pointed out, he was in Dresden and traumatized by what he saw as a failure of this Russian empire and felt like the Soviet Union was responsible for losing the Russian empire, and that's why he came back to take back over this Russian empire that the Soviet Union lost. So that's all totally in keeping with everything I think I have said about him. Definitely drops the bomb because there are NATO and non-NATO member states that are included in his very ominous threat. I mean, he's threatening that this army of 200,000 troops, he wants to roll across Europe and reclaim all of this lost Soviet territory. And this is very much what I've been referring to him all week as Hitler 2.0. Professor McFall has stated that following World War II, this is why all of these treaties and norms were put in place to prevent large, powerful countries from just rolling in and taking over territory from weaker states. I saw an interesting comment that it is not appropriate at this moment for people to pick up this mantle of the U.S. is to blame and caused this. I have had an experience, I'm a survivor of domestic relationship, partnership abuse, emotional abuse. And that's why I recognize very clearly in kind of government powers or government rulers where you see some of these same patterns of abusive men in particular. And so this is definitely in keeping with the patterns of an abuser. And to all of the people who say this is the United States' fault, the United States caused this, U.S. colonialism, you need to stop yourselves because you should never excuse an abuser or blame other people for the actions of an abuser. Because an abuser should not be abusive, regardless of the behavior of anyone else around him. So let's just put a stop to blame shifting that anyone is to blame for the behavior of an abuser. Because I have lived through that in my own personal life, and I can tell you it is not effective or constructive. It may be a coping mechanism. Everyone responds to this kind of stress and grief in different ways. I've seen it in my own family where they turn the blame on me, that somehow anything I did was responsible for the abuse that I received. And I can tell you, having been in that position, it does not help. So now that we've kind of identified the patterns here, the reality setting in, it makes you wonder what level of desperation he's reached, what level of, that if he has damaged the Russian economy so badly that it's not growing, and the only option that he sees to bring the Russian economy back to life is he needs to go conquer all of this Eastern European territory, it really makes me ask, he's really not a good leader for Russia. I'm really curious. The Russian oligarchs are apparently who he's trying to prove something to. And I would ask them this question. Is this person who is this desperate really the person you want in charge of your bank accounts? So that's my response to Putin's speech today. With his nostalgia for Russian imperialism, wanting to go back 30 years ago and correct all of the mistakes the Soviet Union made by losing all of these territories. I can guarantee you, Vladimir Putin, that the people who live in those territories do not want you to rule them. They do not want you to come in and be a dictator the way that the Soviet Union was. They do not want you to come in and threaten to kill off your political opponents. They do not want you to come in and have mandates in censorship about what they're allowed to think. I have personal firsthand knowledge of that. So I'm sorry that their interests and their desires collide and do not agree with your imperialistic ambitions. But that's the reality the rest of the world is facing, kind of rooted and grounded in that reality. We'll see how they handle this. The whole world has hopes and prayers behind the leaders involved in trying to navigate this situation going forward.